Bonn Park is supported by Four Corners Algonquin, authentic, original, off the beaten path. Located a short 5-hour drive from the region of Waterloo, Four Corners Algonquin Camping and Glamping is Algonquin Park's newest one-of-a-kind safari tent camping experience. Sport or rest, thrill or contemplation, bonding with friends or family, you'll find something to do for every ability, for every taste, and for every budget. Fall asleep in our king-size beds listening to the sounds of nature. Try our no-charge, self-guided itineraries, trail and beach accessible wheelchairs, and Fire Buddy program to help you get your nightly campfires crackling. View the Perseid meteor shower at our dark sky-friendly viewing location. Bring your own creature comforts or reserve them from our quartermaster shack and have them delivered right to your site. With a maximum of 40 guests on 90 acres, we are well equipped for new physical distancing requirements. Whether you are a camping novice or a camping ninja, check us out on Facebook or visit us at fourcornersalgonquin.ca to book your adventure.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Jacqueline Watty.
Jacqueline is the vice president of the board of directors of the Humane Society.
She's also a longtime photography client of mine and one of my greatest supporters.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to really talking to her. She's an active community member, and she also works at Waterloo's Permanent Institute.
Yeah, she's in community relations and philanthropic partnerships.
One of the things I'm most looking forward to is talking to her about the evolution of the Humane Society, its advocacy, enforcement, and also some of the misconceptions around it.
She's got some very passionate ideas about how we treat animals in our community and how we could all be doing better.
Let's bring her in.
Here's Jacqueline Watty. Jigsy!
How much is that doggy in the window? The one with the waggly tail. How much is that doggy in the window? I do hope that dog is for sale.
Okay, we're here with Jacqueline Watty. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, how did you and Jacqueline meet?
Well, before I tell that story, I'm going to tell Jacqueline something that she doesn't know about me. This is the first night or day that I've spent time with her that I've actually said her name out loud, and here's why.
Okay.
I get nervous with names. I know your name. I've known you for a very long time, but I've been told many times to use your nickname, and I'm nervous about it. And then I don't use your real name because it seems too formal. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I never address you by any name.
No. When you do, I think you call me Jigsy. You have called me Jigsy.
Have I?
Yeah, a couple times. But
or Mom, because we're usually in the middle of a photo shoot.
This
and I'm
is
shooting
true.
your family.
And we're in a discombobulated state.
Usually.
Yes. Yeah.
Where did the nickname Jigsy come from?
My husband gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know fully where it's derived from, but
Yeah.
perhaps my love of hip-hop music and
could be.
Jacqueline, and it sort of just started to flow. So.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will get over that because I've said your name about 10 times tonight. now.
Okay.
Jacqueline.
It's a great name.
It is a really great name. We were going to call Summer Jacqueline, and then we called her Summer.
It's a nice name.
It is a nice name.
Yeah.
So I think we actually met. Our husbands used to work together in the
Yes.
car world.
That's right.
And I actually think we met at a mutual friend's house. They were having a barbecue and kind of wine night.
Really?
And the Strongmans?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's 100 years ago.
It's 100 years ago.
It is.
And I remember we hit it off right away. And Daryl, your husband, had said something like, so you guys all hooked up on Facebook or whatever? And I was like, oh, I don't do Facebook.
I don't Facebook.
Right? And he's like, oh, you're so cool. You guys are going to be friends for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm all over social media.
This was like, it was brand new.
It was fresh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
He might have even said the Facebook. That's how old it was. But actually, we know each other because our husbands used to work together. And you guys immediately hired me to take photos of the two of you, which turned into photos of the two of you and dogs, which turned into photos of the two of you and children, which turned into the photos of the two of you and children and dogs. I've seen many dogs in your life.
You've seen an urn with my dog in it.
I have shot an urn.
You rolled nicely with that adjustment to our photo shoot. So
I thought it was really beautiful that you brought that your dog.
I couldn't leave him at home.
I know.
Too fresh. Too fresh.
Too
Yeah.
new. The
yeah.
wind was too new. So that's actually how we went. Jacqueline's my most loyal client in photography.
Thank you.
I look forward to shooting her family every year. Her kids look forward to looting through my loot bag. I actually think I forgot it last time. I always have little treats for the kids, some type of like treasure chest, and I had
gourmet
cookies in my bag, and I was just like, take these.
I think the little one said, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I know.
Yeah.
They were a little too fancy for kids.
The original photos with you was actually a birthday present.
Oh.
Because I kept saying, I just love to have pictures of the dogs. And back then you didn't really take as many, still where you were taking pictures to the Photoshop and getting them, waiting 2 weeks to get them back.
Exactly.
Not quite that long ago, but you weren't purposely taking pictures of your animals. And so that was one of my birthday gifts.
Yeah, that's great. We actually had you lie across the river on a log.
Yes.
And you were game for that.
Yes.
And every photo shoot since then, we've been in the dirt, we've been on the ground, we've been wrestling with dogs, and it's been super fun.
We are comfortable with you. So thank you. And you roll with all that we bring to the table.
All that you bring to the table.
There's a lot.
You do it once a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes
every fall.
twice.
Mm-hmm.
For
We've done
headshots sometimes.
larger family
yeah,
photo shoots.
right.
It's been 5 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So we're due.
It's time.
We're due.
So, Jacqueline, you are the
Yes.
president of the KW Humane Society.
I am, yes.
What's
Providing
that all
everyone votes me in. So currently I'm the vice chair. It's a great opportunity to have your influence and say over an organization that you care deeply about. I've been involved with them. I think it's been 4 years on the board. Prior to that, I was involved in sort of their humane education event kind of thing. So I'd take my dog, who I adopted from there, and we'd go to events and show people that rescue dogs are not scary, and that you can find some really great companions in the center. So that's where it all began. And slowly but surely, we've progressed. The organization continues to progress, and I really stand behind the types of programming and things that they try to do in the community. So it's much more than a shelter, and I think that's what keeps me interested.
There's something you just said there, which is you teaching people that dogs aren't, or that rescues aren't scary.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I have been dealing with a fear of dogs for
Yes.
the entire time that we've known you. Your dogs are the farthest thing from
You've
scary.
done well. You've done well.
You've really taught me. You've taught me a lot.
Good.
And because they're gentle and they're kind and they're protective of your children and they're not rough. And you also mentioned something about the many programs that you guys have. Something
Yes.
in your literature I was reading was that that your organization does more than people probably think.
Absolutely.
And that's probably a big part of what you guys are doing is just educating people on the services that are there, right?
It's definitely true. I mean, when you think of a humane society, I think people think of the dog pound from 40, 50 years ago.
Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah, absolutely. Which that movie that just came out, the feature dog is actually a rescue dog.
Oh,
who's,
really?
In the movie.
That's
Not
awesome.
that that's fully,
that's good.
But nice to know. I read that on the news. But no, I think it's about people and pets. I think that's really where we've changed our messaging, and we continue to do so. When you look at how many kids we educate in a year in the school system, we come to classrooms, do demonstrations on not that you have to have a pet, but how do you deal with a pet? How do you take care of an animal? And that sparks questions far beyond the pet itself. It's about responsibility. It's about being an active community member. I mean, that's one of the many programs we do. Camps, we do obedience training, and it's all with generous donations from people in the community. We're not government funded, and that's also a misconception that maybe the city's paying for us or the government's paying. No, it's all through the generosity of those who support us at every level. So we're quite fortunate.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
How misunderstood the Humane Society is.
Yes.
And it wasn't honestly for me until I went on a field trip with one of my daughters.
Oh.
Through that, I realized how much I didn't.
Great.
I had some really antiquated ideas about what the Humane Society was.
Yes.
So that must be an ongoing thing that you're tirelessly having to work at. Too.
It is. It's an animal welfare center, whereas people often still refer to it as a shelter. And when you go in there, it's far from it. I mean, yes, there are animals in sort of caged off areas, but they have people who go and sit with them, companions that will go and keep them socialized. People, dedicated volunteers who will come there 6-7 days a week and walk the dogs, sit with the cat so that they're more adoptable, so that when you come in with your family, you don't see some scared little animal in the corner. You see an animal who wants to engage with you, and that's what gets them adopted is when they engage with you. So
And helping them through that, like the animal through that process along the way.
Definitely.
And it also sounds like you're a human education center, really. Then.
Yeah. Yeah. When you really think about it, yes. I mean, we have so many programs that we're just trying to do the outreach side of things, and to, even if you're not a pet owner, help you understand how violence is very much linked to animal abuse. That's been a more recent feature and something that's been more at the forefront. Humane Canada, which is, we are a member of Humane Canada. So they're sort of not the governing, but the national group of humane societies. And they have people over the spectrum. They have rescue groups, they have humane societies, they have staunch activists that, are really against, that are, certain things like farming and all that kind of stuff. So we had our first ever, it's called the Link conference in Toronto, talking to officers that go out and actually enforce these bylaws that are in the community around, hey, you have 7 dogs in your backyard and one is escaping and hurting someone's cat or whatever, but educating them on the link between someone who's willing to hurt a person and someone who's willing to hurt an animal. So when you look at police as well, they're saying, hey, if you can seriously harm an animal, what on earth are you going to do to people? And so making that link sooner in the equation, often, I mean, we don't have full stats on it, but often can, if I'm going to beat up an animal, you want to investigate me. Why are you doing that?
Right.
That's against the law.
Right.
So what other issues are surrounding that incident? And now we want to keep an eye on you, because what are you going to do to someone in the community? Who has the capacity to hurt something that's not doing anything
Able
to you?
to defend himself.
Yes. So you see a direct link between child and animal abuse.
Well, that kind of leads me into something else I wanted to touch on, which is in the literature, I was reading about how vulnerable people have vulnerable pets.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about what the KW Humane Society does to help people
Sure.
in that sense?
One of the challenges we have faced with those that are more vulnerable, so first and foremost, the shelters often don't take their animals. So if you have someone who is homeless and they have a companion animal that often is keeping them very much, I don't want to say sane, but keeping them on the straight and narrow, because they have an animal to care for, they have a companion, but when they go and seek help.
Oh, so I was just going to say, my kids are partial French immersion, and I'm not great with French, but the word for pet is like a companion animal.
Oh,
That's the word for pet. So I was like, oh, that makes so much sense
it
to
does.
me.
Yeah, it does. And when they don't have access to a shelter overnight and they have these pets, you see them on the street. So what can we do? We've been working with HUG, and I'm going to say, I probably can't define it properly, but just trying to understand how can we better bridge that gap and make those that are vulnerable in that particular way for housing understand that we're not going to take their animal. They do have the opportunity that if they did need to go into a shelter for a couple of weeks, we could look into possible emergency boarding for them, and they would get their pet back. So
And I read that too about helping people with pets who are victims of domestic abuse also.
Yes. I actually have a case close to home, someone that I know quite well who had a cat that needed to be boarded. And now we're working on trying to make that length of stay longer, because it is a cost, obviously, but we want to help that individual. So if they were to, we often get referrals from those organizations who say this person is in our care. We really want them to keep their animal. What can you do to help? And we try to work something out. So those are all progressing programs that we've had in place for a long time. I wouldn't say we talk about them publicly too much, but we slowly are doing that under our newer leadership and trying to educate people about the people side of pets.
Right. I think that's a beautiful thing, having everybody work together that way.
Yeah.
Speaking of people, I think about how those who have to go out into the community in the vehicles and investigate and see things, I imagine they have some similar experiences to police officers who, and first responders, and that there must be a lot of stress that comes with it.
Definitely.
And I'm thinking about their mental well-being. Must that job must take a real toll on them, and how they have to. I met someone at Humane Society years ago, Mark.
Oh, yes. He was with us for quite some time.
Yeah, and Mark, I asked Mark about this, and he talked a bit about how, I think he said something like, you kind of have to just deal with this ahead of time and realize that everything you're doing is for the betterment of the animals, and that whatever situation you're going into, whatever you're going to see, you have to always remind yourself that this is your role to do it, and that it's not really doing anybody any favors to kind of wallow in the negativity and the upset and become cynical, I guess.
Definitely. You might have heard of the term compassion fatigue. And so that's something that runs rampant in any sort of organization that's dealing with humans or pets. And so that's something that we really focus. And when I say we, again, I'm on the board. So although we're a governing board, we're not operational. We have direct connections with the staff there. The ED is our employee, if you really want to get technical. And so through her, we have access to everyone at the Humane Society. We want to improve the culture there any way we can. So compassion fatigue comes up a lot, especially in the industry. And we look at ways of mitigating that. So whether it's lunchtime, lunch and learns, or making sure that they have appropriate wellness sick days, and making them feel as though it's okay to feel that way, because it can be overwhelming. Even for me, not working actually in the buildings that we oversee, you can get really emotional about the capabilities of people and the horrible things they can do to pets. So
yeah, what took you there to the Humane Society? Like, what?
I adopted a dog from there. So I'd always been interested in animals. I've always been a pet person, an animal person. Yeah, I love animals. So I sort of poked my head in to see if there was an opportunity to get a second dog. So thankfully my husband allowed me to get a second dog. And now we have Pico, who we've had for 10 years. We got her when she was 2, and she's the poster child of, they aren't broken. They often just need to readjust, and you often don't know their history. So we were quite lucky to have her. And so from there, I sort of started to engage deeper and learn more about it, frankly.
Yeah.
I had my own preconceived notions as to what it was, and certainly blew my mind when I learned a little bit more.
Can you go a bit more in depth into the volunteer positions and how they're interacting? I think I met a volunteer a while back, and I was a little bit surprised to hear that, like, they said, well, I spent my shift, cleaning litter and stuff like that. Boxes. I thought,
there are people
that's
who
what you did?
absolutely want to do that. So there are different...
It has to be done, right?
It does.
Yeah.
And we rely heavily on volunteers, again, because we can't staff as heavily as we might like to. We run pretty lean on the dollars that we have. And so you have people who do go in and change the litter boxes. We have certified dog walkers. So these people are trained. So we don't just say, hey, come to the Humane Society and clean up some lovely messes in the areas. We train them on how to properly clean a pen, if you will. If they're dog walkers, they go through strict training and they get different levels of training. So we have a dog that's big and strong and difficult. We will only let a certain color of dog walker handle that animal. There's so many ways to get involved. Volunteering in the children's youth programs. We have part-timers that go into the schools and do the education. So if you're interested ever in investigating, we have a great website that you can access all the different volunteer opportunities. And events.
We'll link to that website.
Yeah,
too.
events are a big one too.
Are there some animals that I imagine, like, let's say maybe a 12-year-old cat comes in, has some special needs, and the backstory. Are there animals that just for whatever reason are just there for really, really long time periods, and there just isn't the right fit for whatever reason?
Yes. And I think it frustrates people sometimes when they do come in to adopt an animal and they say, but I really want that animal because I love old cats. And, but it's about fit for both the people and the animals. So it's not a personal attack if you don't get approved for an animal, although I know people can get really attached to the idea of having a certain animal that's with an animal welfare center. But yeah, they're longer because they're older. You do have a segment of people who love older pets. I'm one of those. Sadly, when my dogs move on one day and it's their time, I'll probably look at adopting older animals. Yeah. It's a different kind of experience. And I think it's rewarding in different ways too, depending on the person. So
I actually think that the age of your dogs is part of what made it easier for me to get comfortable with them.
Yeah,
because they weren't super energetic and trying to knock me over and all those things that younger dogs
the leashes
sometimes
certainly cross over and have cut you off a few times, but yeah.
I think childhood experiences with dogs especially, and me as well, it takes a long time before you begin to get comfortable with dogs in your adult life even. And right now my one daughter has a real fear of dogs, and
would you know what might have triggered that? Because often you look to see where could some people are just afraid of animals. That's fine. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
They're young. But was there something that maybe...
I don't know in my daughter's case. For me, it was a neighbor who let their Dobermans loose, and I remember running, like, terrified, and that was enough for me. And also a German Shepherd named Roger that lived across the street.
Okay.
That really scared me. But I guess you must see that a lot, you know what I mean, where people have fears and trepidations of dogs that are maybe particularly bigger or more aggressive looking.
Yes, and you mentioned people again. So you've mentioned two very large breeds that often have misconceptions. when you look throughout history, and I don't know if I'll get this right, but in the 70s it was Dobermans, in the 80s it was German Shepherds, in the 90s it was Rottweilers, and now it's any sort of bully breed. So
Right.
people might refer to them as pit bulls, but they have this stigma attached to them.
Yeah.
Sometimes because of the people that you equate with them owning this type of animal, and the way they care for them and what they're hoping to achieve by having an animal that looks a certain way or behaves a certain way. So that can often send the wrong messaging as well. Media is not a help with that either. You don't hear about German Shepherds biting children or Lab Retrievers biting children, but it happens, and it happens regularly, and it often is connected back to ownership of that animal.
That is so interesting. I've never had anybody explain that to me, that you're absolutely right, that somehow by decade or whatever
Right.
is there's
It's a trend.
stigma attached to a
We
certain
demonize
dog.
different animals
Yeah.
like we do people.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it's there's such a close relation to that when you think of it that way.
Yeah.
To that point, the dog that bit me, that well, first of all, we used to be babysat by my Uncle George's Doberman named Baron, and all the parents would smoke and drink upstairs, and the kids were in the basement, and Baron was in charge.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
that was scary for me. I used to
Okay.
sit on the top ledge of the couch, and all the other kids would play, but the barking and the barking and looking right at me was
Well,
too much
and
for me.
a big animal. I mean, I've
Yeah.
bit by 2 dogs. One, it shouldn't matter the breed, but it was just a border collie that was always chained up outside. And so the girl at the house said, sure, you can go pet it. And it bit me right away because it's not socialized.
Right.
It's sitting in your backyard 24 hours a day.
And you're coming into
barking
that
at you
animal
from
space.
afar.
Yeah.
And I went up, got low, got to its level,
Yeah.
tried to do the proper things, and it bit me. And I remember standing there horrified. And I would have been, oh my gosh, 13 maybe. That didn't ruin my impression of animals, but it definitely made me look at how I approached them. And then it made my mind open up as to the ownership of these animals. So that certainly played a part in how I've grown to understand animals in my life.
Yeah, so Baron never touched me.
Yeah.
The dog that did it for me was, I was at my neighborhood friend's house, and their aunt was visiting, and it was like a toy poodle, like a small little thing. And I hugged it, and it got scared, and it bit me on my ear and wouldn't let go. And I was terrified from that moment on. So that little tiny, beautiful little puffball is what did it for me.
But
really.
hugging is a big thing.
Yeah, I didn't know any better. I had no experience with animals, and
Exactly.
there was no adult around to tell me to stop.
Right,
you know?
right.
Yeah, I was little. I was probably 6 or
Yeah.
7, something like that.
And it stays with you.
Yeah.
So once family members realized I had this fear of dogs, I had this brother-in-law named Mike who would, when I was a little kid, I'd go over and he would tell me about this dog next door that was going to get me if I wasn't good and wasn't quiet. So I realized that I had this fear of a dog that I'm not even sure if it existed.
Existed or not.
I
It
never
was
actually
all in
saw
your
it.
mind.
Yeah.
It's like a boogeyman.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyways, every time I went to visit my sister at this house, I had this fear of this dog that I realize now maybe didn't even exist.
It's
I'm
true.
sorry, Marcia.
My husband's family, some of them are from the Caribbean, and so every time we go down to visit there, it's a very different culture there when it comes to companion animals. And so his uncle, who lived way up in the hills on a pineapple farm, every time we'd go visit him, he'd always say, watch out for the dogs. The dogs, they're meant to be protective. And I kept having great conversations with him about they don't have to be aggressive, and you don't have to train them to be aggressive to protect you because they instinctively know. And I would give him different examples or whatever. But I remember the first time he forgot that we were arriving, and he said, "What about Jacqueline?" And there I was sitting with 2 huge dogs, petting them. And he said, "Oh, now I have to." Now they've gotten used to people. And he was never bad to them in any way, shape, or form. But they have a different purpose down there, is to alert of strangers.
And then this is very common outside of North America, is that you're not this pet's mommy and daddy.
Right.
You own that animal.
That's right.
And that's something that I think that KW Humane Society is trying to remind people is that no, you don't own this animal. You're lucky to adopt this animal or have this animal in your family. It is not your property.
That's
right?
true. People
Yeah.
use the term guardianship a lot more,
Yeah, that's what
especially
they
in the
say.
animal welfare industry. Ownership just means like it's your car. And I struggle with things like, if we were to have a sale on cats or whatever. So we really have to choose our words wisely, because if we're looking to promote long-term ownership, companionship, we don't want to treat them like a commodity. So whether it's a cat or a dog or a guinea pig, we're kind of in a disposable society, and pets are certainly victims of that mentality. So
Absolutely. So the Humane Society, it's a nonprofit.
It is.
With a charitable status.
Yes.
Yeah. So how does your board governance work? How does that work?
Sure.
What
So
all
we
do you guys
have
do?
12 on our current board. So we have leadership positions, and then we have regular director roles as well. So every month we will get together and have an executive director's report, and she will update us on everything from how many animals came into the center, how many wildlife seizures they've done, if there was any euthanasia that month. We look at donations, and so we're basically in charge of, we have a fiduciary responsibility to act in good faith of the organization. And so if something were to go awry, or if we were to take risks financially that we shouldn't be, we would also be responsible for that. So if that helps a bit. So we've shifted very much from the, hey, go sell cupcakes, which is certainly a part of our model, to a governance perspective. So if something comes up in the media, which often does, we're pulled into that because it's something to do with risk and reputation.
You mentioned wildlife. Now, it's always been my understanding, I may be completely misinformed here, that, well, maybe the Humane Society will come out and check on a raccoon that's for some reason out and about, but for the most part, when it comes to birds and things like that, that's not the Humane Society's area, but rather I've often heard, the place in Guelph will look at that. Is this complete
like the Humane Society in Guelph, or the vet college?
Yeah,
I used to work in
sorry,
Guelph,
I think the vet college.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
You can just see how much information I don't have
that's
here.
okay.
But you
That's
hear
okay.
this stuff, you're like, the Humane Society won't come out for that.
Right. It depends on what it is. So you can call, it used to be 310 SPCA, and now we have a new laws that we could talk about as well that have come into play as of January 1st. So that's an exciting win for animals in Ontario. But when it comes to wildlife, we are able to go out and investigate these calls, or we can transfer them to the appropriate person. So an example would be that the city, as an example, will contract the Humane Society out to do their licensing. So when we ask, can you license your animal? That's actually the city requesting our services to have those types of licensing. So we have a similar thing when it comes to wildlife, but we are definitely involved. Guelph's Humane Society is absolutely world-renowned for their wildlife side of things that they do and the rehabs that they do. So we all have a little bit differences, but they all work together, which is really nice, and learn from one another.
Yeah, I
Can
didn't
rely
know
on
that.
each other.
Yeah.
So in the news, when we hear like a giant snake was found, somebody let their exotic pet go.
Yes.
Have you ever dealt with something like that? And if and when you do, who takes that thing? Who takes that animal?
So
reptile, whatever.
Yes. So that could be the Humane Society is the first point of contact, and then they would look to their network, or we might house that animal for a short period of time and they get it to an expert, because maybe we're not an expert in snakes. But we have animals that we adopt of all kinds, lizards and guinea pigs, and we've seen ferrets, chinchillas.
Something that crosses my mind when I think of the Humane Society is somebody who's taken on a pet who didn't realize the responsibility and is then giving that pet up. Does that happen a lot? What are the circumstances? Like, do you know a percentage of how many of your animals might be?
That's a great question. So
situation?
owner surrenders, that's what we would term them as, is
Owner
definitely a regular thing. And you think about the staff that have to deal with the people, especially if it's a really emotional thing to have to let that pet go. Maybe there's been a major life change personally that they cannot take care of that animal, or they're just overwhelmed. And so the good thing about when they do come to the Humane Society is that they're going to find a good home. Like the chances of them being not adopted are pretty slim. Much better than putting it on, say, a Kijiji, free to a good home. Who's vetting that person? Well, they seem really nice, and next thing you know, your dog's in a dog fighting ring or something extreme. And it happens all the time. You hear these stories, and it's true. So I don't really have a percentage on that, although I could get one. I would say it's higher than you might think.
Most people of animal lovers are of the opinion that our laws are really pitiful when it comes to consequences and punishment for those who abuse animals. And when you mentioned new laws, I think this is what you're talking about, that there's something finally in place that's a little bit more.
And it's been in place for since January 1st, but it's as a result of multiple players working together to try and push those laws forward. So I'm not an expert in those laws per se. Certainly our ED would be, and like the ins and outs of all of them, but they're just much stronger for offenders, longer sentences, different things that had loopholes now don't have, like bestiality is one of them.
Jeez Louise.
I know, and that's Canada-wide.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But it's a lot of the laws that we currently hadn't been updated since the early 1900s or prior to that.
Wow.
So
okay.
On one hand, it's great that we've had something in place since the 1900s that shows that society there is a segment of society that cares about companion animals, farm animals, all of that. But they could be stronger, and now they are stronger, more so in Ontario than Canada-wide, which surprises me even when I say that out loud. But those that were advocating for change have certainly convinced those in charge to pass these laws, and it's a better system. It's a better way of dealing with animal cruelty laws. There's one number to call instead of calling, oh my gosh, this person for wildlife and this person for a farm animal. You call one number, and then it's dispatched out appropriately. Yeah, which is easier for the general public if you really think about it.
Oh, the easier you make it, the more people will follow the proper channel. Do some of those laws cover what we were talking about earlier, which is maybe reporting an animal abuser to the police, and then that person might be investigated because they could be a violent person in general?
Yeah, so I think police is a key word to that. They're much more engaged with what we're doing. They've taken on a lot more in terms of understanding the connections between the two, which I'm sure they've already known, but it's a little bit more formalized and official. So they're definitely our partners in this now. And we're no longer enforcing the laws solely on our own or by Humane Society. There's a much broader communal approach to enforcing those laws. Yes.
It's too bad that connection has to be pointed out between animal abuse and people abusing people, because the animal abuse on its own
is bad.
Is completely bad.
This is right. That every serial killer movie and TV series starts with killing the family bunny.
That's right.
Or cat.
Shooting something. A beaver, whatever. It's yes, and I think it's just become more obvious. And I think the police forces, they know, they see the connection, but they're so overwhelmed. And speak, there are way bigger fish to fry, I guess you'd say, than maybe being concerned about a raccoon.
Do you know much about homeless? I see homeless men sometimes who have a dog with them, and I often wonder what that dog's life is like, and how we have a human being who's struggling just to survive on the streets, and I wonder what that dog's life is all about.
Sure, that's a great. We talked about homelessness a little bit earlier. The dog doesn't often know any different, and that dog is often very happy to be a companion to this person. So you do get the occurrences where you're in, say, a drug house where there's dogs roaming free. I would say that's less of a plus. But when you see one individual with their pet, again, that's a very strong bond, and to separate them is not a good thing for either. So there are programs, and not so much that we enforce, but you see it elsewhere, where we help provide food for them. We have low-cost spay and neuter clinics where if you qualify, we will spay or neuter your pet for you, and then send you back on your way with no questions asked. So both in Kitchener-Waterloo and Stratford, Perth. So they're one organization with two operating branches, which I didn't say in the beginning, but two very different communities with different needs. But we have that spay and neuter low-cost clinic in both areas, which is great. So
how do they differ? What are the needs of the two different?
Stratford, Perth is a lot smaller, so I would say we're a bit more of a metropolis than they might be, just by sheer numbers and demographics. You have a bit of an older population in Stratford, Perth, so there's a lot of cats in Stratford, Perth. People look at potential puppy mills that they're breeders that are overbreeding, and breeders I use a very loosely, because a lot of people will breed in their backyard and call themselves a breeder. Right. So stuff like that where there's cruelty involved. When you see a puppy mill, it's they want you to pay for a certain type of dog, and maybe that mother of the puppies is shipped around to different locations to be overbred. When it comes to free puppies, it could just be a litter that they didn't want or have. It isn't necessarily a cruelty issue. It's more so when, where's the mother of the puppy that I'm about to buy, and she's nowhere to be found. Oh, she's somewhere else. So the sad thing is that we're not able to investigate if you don't report it.
Right.
So there's no warrant to come into a property, and people get really passionate about this subject. Really passionate. So it's a bit of a complicated issue.
Well, what is the route taken when, let's say, a big aggressive dog comes in, and it's almost like a hole? This dog needs to be completely re-educated. Sure. That's the right word.
So we try to re-educate that animal. So each animal that comes through the center is assessed. Yeah. We have behavioral therapists and experts on staff, and they assess, okay, so what is making this dog aggressive? Is it just that it's been cooped up and locked up for 3 years? Is it something that we can work with? And so we will do everything in our power to rehabilitate this dog. If we deem it unadoptable, we will reach out to a couple rescue partners. So you've heard of rescues in the community, and they're all different and they're governed differently. you and I could have a rescue in our backyard and say it's a rescue, but there's some very reputable ones that we will reach out to that I guess you would almost say are our partners and say, we have this case. We're not sure it's adoptable. Will you take on the animal? And they feel very passionately about making sure that there's no euthanasia. We don't want to euthanize this dog if we can somehow adopt it eventually or put it into the right scenario that it could be an office dog or something. And often we'll reach out and do that, and they will take the dog on if they have space, which is good. It's a last resort to do anything like euthanize a dog.
I understand if you don't have the answers to these questions, but when people talk, they go, well, I know someone who has 16 cats, right? And someone will say, well, you're not allowed to have 16 cats. And the numbers always change, right?
Right.
I know a neighbor who says that she's not allowed to have 8 cats, Are there real numbers out there?
There are bylaws.
There
Actually,
are
the city of Kitchener has a bylaw of 3 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
The city of Waterloo has no bylaw for how many dogs you can have.
Okay.
Dude, that's crazy.
Right. So
So how many are you going to end up with yourself?
I only have 2.
Oh, wait, dude, you're in Kitchener though.
I'm only allowed to have 2. What was that? I think I agreed to 1 dog per acre. And we don't have an acre, and we've had 2 dogs for a long time, as you know. So
Yeah. How about
What's the
cats?
number for cats?
cats,
I'm very
gosh,
interested.
I think it's 4, if I remember correctly.
So Marshall, you can't get another cat
No, that'd be amazing if I could actually use that.
to get.
But I'd have to check the
Some
stat
weird
for Waterloo because it might be different.
No, I think it is 4.
Is it 4? Okay.
No, I'm just.
No.
So are you the person that has 16, Marshall?
I'm the one who has 4, and I'm constantly saying no more than
Yeah,
4.
sure.
Well,
No
now you have
more.
a
Yeah.
stat. The
That-
pro said
Yeah.
4 cats only.
Yeah.
The pro. I
Yeah.
could be wrong. I mean, I'm not
okay.
it
Just use
changes
it.
sometimes on me, but yeah,
I was in a house once with 21 cats.
that's a lot. We would
Yeah.
probably consider that person a hoarder,
Yeah.
and you would look into the welfare of that person. And
Yeah, that cat
of course.
occupied. There was a cat occupying every ledge. Everywhere there was a ledge, there was a cat.
It's a little
so,
off-putting.
Yeah.
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 With dog breeds, I imagine there's dog breeds you don't see. Like, I mean, there's a. You see pugs, for example. You probably
Yeah.
oh, you do, or what's that one dog? It's very interesting. It has a name like Afghan or something.
Those are pretty
Oh, yeah.
rare.
Yeah, like I mean, you probably don't see like a Dalmatian and a
You
a
do.
Great Dane, and
Often they're mixes,
Yeah.
or they're if they are purebred, it's usually due to someone moving or whatever. So it's interesting how they come into our care. They're very different. They could be strays. They could be transferred from another Humane Society. They could be owner surrender. Could be a cruelty case. So there's some really interesting animals that come through the center. One thing that I'm really passionate about, and we were recently on CTV News, was breed-specific legislation that's active in Ontario. I could talk about it all day, and not that I'm
Tell
an
us.
expert,
yeah.
but we were asked, the laws are being reviewed. We've had breed-specific legislation in Ontario for over 10 years.
What do you mean by that, though?
Sure, great question. So it's targeting animals that most people would call them a pit bull, but pit bulls are actually a mix, and that's a slang term for what they used this type of dog, which they would breed like bull mastiffs and bulldogs and make them look as bulky and muscular as possible and have them fight in pits. That's 200 plus years ago. Yeah, so it was actually a sport that people would do and gamble and kind of like cockfights, stuff like that, but with dogs. And so Ontario's had a ban against any bully breed type dogs, but specific to pit bulls. And so that would be like an American Stafford Terrier that you see in the States, which actually in the States, bully breeds are one of the top family dogs. If you look back historically, they used to call them the nanny dogs in some instances where they would be kind of like your companion when you go out. You have this dog. So there's a big misconception around what even a pit bull is. But in order to even enforce the law, so back to the law enforcement, if I come to your house and I see the dog that looks bulky, oh my gosh, there's this pit bull in your backyard and I think it's going to hurt me. Or maybe there's an incident where it's mislabeled, which happens all the time. And then you see it in the news story. So what the proposed sort of review of the law is to make it not so much focus on a certain breed or certain look of a dog, but to make laws that are sort of breed neutral. So focus on aggressive dogs. We see the stats. We see the bite stats. Every dog you can think of bites. If it's in the wrong scenario, if it's not in the right home, if there's children rolling all over it, kind of thing. That's where those triggers can occur. How you were bit, you didn't realize hugging a dog isn't a good thing.
Had no idea.
Yeah,
I
but
don't recommend it if you don't know the dog.
right. And the bigger the dog and the more tough the dog, back to the 70s, 80s, 90s of the type of dog, the more damage they can do. So there's a lot of misconceptions around the type of dog that is banned, but bite statistics, they haven't gone down. And we're advocating towards a breed neutral law that focuses on ownership back to people, and that they shouldn't be banned, that they should be trained, and that there should be equality for these animals, because really nothing's really changed in Ontario since we've enacted that law. And you're seeing municipalities globally reverse them. So people who have had them in their jurisdictions for years and years and years are saying, this hasn't worked. This isn't helping. Really, we need to focus on people and advocacy and the individual dog, and not the way a dog looks, which is discriminatory.
Yeah.
And the taking ownership and the educating people, again, which is true of most things, right?
And it's sad because let's be honest, we can't even get discrimination of people
Yeah.
right. So can you imagine even getting these dogs who we try to advocate for, and the news wanted to know, what's your stance on breed-specific legislation? And they actually came to us right before we approved our statement. So we've never supported it, but we've never had something in writing saying this is why we don't support it. The Veterinarian Association does not support it. Vets in general do not support it because it's not enforceable. It's penalizing the animal and not the person, and it's discriminatory.
Something I really struggle with. I'll try to do my best to explain this. So you'll have a pet food store chain in town,
Okay.
and they will have a connection with somebody who rescues cats and has lots of cats in their home. And the cats come to the pet store and stay for a while and then get adopted through the pet store. So we did that one time. It's a beautiful cat named Molly, and within a month, she had breathing issues, and we took her to the vet, and she had FIPS. Do you know FIP?
No.
The acronym? It's hard to explain. It's a respiratory.
Okay.
It's terminal. There's no, like, that's within an hour we had to learn everything we could about FIPS, and
It's terrible.
and the veterinarian said there's no survival rate for this. So
What do you do with that?
Yeah, so you put her down, and then after we did, the veterinarian talked about how. So this is a result of too many cats in one house, and they're passing this amongst them. There's too many cats in this house, right? So I remember afterwards really trying to deal with these feelings about how, well, if these people weren't doing this to try to help these cats, it's kind of like someone's out there trying to help the situation,
Right.
but it's not a good setup, and it actually can be a detriment. It's almost like a lose-lose situation in a sense. And then somebody who adopts a cat like me, and then
You're doing a good thing.
yeah,
From someone who did a good
and
thing.
then the veterinarian, I could tell, had really built up this kind of cynicism and anger towards it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, can I get your thoughts on these cat rescue places that are out there? And
Sure. I mean, in Stratford specifically, we work closely with an organization called Feline Friends, but often they're at the point where it isn't someone's house where they're just gathering cats. Like they're working in partnership with another rescue that can do spay and neuters, or a veterinarian clinic that's helping them have these animals in good care to adopt them out.
It's almost like connecting them with resources.
Yeah, exactly. And people do have these resources if they were to have this situation at home where they're trying to adopt these cats out. There are places they can go to get support. There are places that they can get educated on how to minimize the risks in their home. If they are going to do that, often they can surrender those animals to a Humane Society or a rescue that they trust. But I don't often hear of that story where it's someone's home so say you and I have our own home and we do a rescue and we actually put them up for placement in a pet store. I don't often see that or hear that.
Yeah, there's like a big binder, and you go through the binder, and I can see all the cats that are available.
Yeah, and I mean, good for them. It's they care.
Yeah,
which is
everybody's
good.
intentions are good,
That's
but
right.
there's something about that isn't working well. Yeah, okay.
And so when you see the cats that come, they're through the Humane Society, but they're at Pet Value, or they're at Wren's Pet Food is a great partner of ours. They've been vetted, they've been safe. Often if you see animals come in from other countries, we don't have strict laws around quarantines and diseases that show up after they're already here. So not even knowing where those cats may have come from, were they just feral cats in the yard, or were they brought up from somewhere else? It's hard to tell. It's hard to manage disease if sometimes there's diseases that we're not familiar with.
And you can't ask them.
No.
Do your board members all have areas of expertise that they bring to?
Yeah, so we try to bring an array of people and backgrounds. We have 2 lawyers, we have a couple accountants, we have marketing and communications person, we have myself who's sort of in philanthropy and outreach.
It's good to have lawyers.
It is good to have lawyers. Yeah, definitely. The current chair of our board, Ross Wells, is a lawyer, and so he's been very helpful to navigate us through different media things that come up. Him and I are great partners in addressing these types of issues because we're coming at it from different lenses and different risk
And what do you
reviews.
find most rewarding about your experience on that board?
The people on the board are great.
Yeah.
The organization is great. And knowing that you could advocate for so many different things. I mean, if I had all the time in the world, I'd be advocating more for refugees, and I'd be more advocating for the environment. But if sometimes you just have to pick one and dig deep. And I've been able to do that and use my expertise to connect the organization with more thought leaders in the community and get their exposure out there. I love making sure, or meeting someone who didn't know something about the Humane Society and now they do, because we connected them to the executive director, who is so more than willing to go out and talk to people.
So being with the Humane Society is not about having to persevere in the face of near constant frustration all the time. Like there's optimism and there's hope and there's things happening that are good.
Yes.
Because I've always thought to myself, I think my heart would be broken within days, and I just couldn't do it anymore.
That could be going back to sort of what Jacqueline was talking about earlier, where we have a stereotype of the KW Humane Society or any humane society being a shelter or a kill shelter or a youth.
And there are shelters like that,
yeah,
right?
But that your place is more of a let's find solutions and
I'm
and
thinking
have
about those
optimism.
people who are those irresponsible pet owners that are walking through those doors.
That is frustrating.
All
But
the
remember, from a board perspective, we don't see all of that.
Yeah.
So although we
Right.
frequent the both locations regularly, we're not as privy to that day to day. Someone's coming in with a litter of puppies, but we'll spay your dog for you. And they'll say, oh, no, we don't want to spay her. And they say, well, if it happens one more time, we might have to seize your dog. You've had 3 litters of puppies that were unwanted. And you say, oh, well, you know, she met some dog in the street. Well, why is the dog in the street? So it's kind of heartbreaking. But I have seen people who've come in and had to rehome their cats or dogs. And it's sad for sure.
Yeah.
But they're in a good place. And I used to walk through those hallways and go, oh, these poor animals. And I walk through and go, hey, you're going to find a great home. The chances of you finding a great home are far better than you being on the street or being on Kijiji, and not to bash Kijiji in general, but it's often you don't know who is on the other side of trying to get your pet. You love it and you want to rehome it, but that person may not have the same intentions as you.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I just want to talk about that I find really interesting about your branch of the KW Humane Society is that you have a full hospital.
We do. Oh, yeah, that's a great thing to talk about. So we've had that for several years now. And in the beginning, it's obviously a cost up front, but it has saved us so much money in transport. So before we'd have to transfer them to Guelph to do a lot of the surgeries, to do the spay and neuters. We didn't have any of that access on site. So both our Stratford location and KW area all use that vet hospital. And so if an animal comes in with a life-threatening condition, we can treat them right there, and their chances of survival are a lot higher. We also do cremation services there for people, euthanasia if you need to say farewell to your pet, and others do have access if they're able to sort of pay for the services to our vet hospital as well. But that's where we do the clinics as well. So people will line up right at the door to get reduced fees for shots for their animals, licensing and tagging. So you've heard of microchipping. We offer that usually for $10. So you can microchip your animal for $10. We'll do that on the spot. And if you lose your animal, we can scan it. It sounds a little creepy because you're literally putting a microchip under the skin of your animals, sort of in between their what do you call those?
We'll be doing
Shoulders?
it with our kids one day. We'll be doing that.
Oh, that's what I hear.
I basically have with their cell
Frightening.
phones.
Yeah, that's true. It's like current GPS at all times. But yeah, we really utilize that hospital, and it was our previous executive director who had that foresight to say this would be such a cost-effective way to do all of the things we need to do and put less trauma back on the animal. So imagine coming into a shelter, who knows your background, who knows how you got there, sending you to Guelph for 3 days to be spayed or to have a leg amputated or something, and coming back to the shelter. It's traumatizing. And then will you get adopted? Or are you going to be sitting in your cage all crunched up in the corner? Probably. Wow. And then you and I might go.
Right. And not.
I'm a bit of an anomaly though. So when I went to meet Pico, who was our little husky diva mix, she didn't care about me. She wanted nothing to do with me. I took her for a walk.
She will not leave your side now.
All she cared about was squirrels and killing mice and all of this stuff. So I remember meeting her, and I'm like, and my husband said, well, you know, I'm looking forward to meeting her, because we had to bring the other dog to meet her to see if they were, like, you know, a match or whatever. And I'm like, well, she doesn't really care for me, but I love her. She's great. I love her spirit. I love her zest for life. She was only 2 at the time, so she was super active. And truly, when I look back, she kept our older dog much more spry, and just looking to be aged more gracefully, I guess you'd say. So,
I don't know a lot about. I've never owned a dog.
Okay.
But when I see this happening all the time, so two dog owners are out, and what they're doing, from what I understand, is the dogs are being socialized, right? So two dogs meet. Sometimes there's a huge size difference in the dogs, right?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And I always wonder. The dog owners always seem pretty much at ease about it. You can tell there's a bit of conversation about it, right? But I always wonder how dog owners aren't thinking that dog that could just chomp my dog in a second, right? And you must have some understanding of what you're doing when you're out with your dog.
I have to assume the owner's putting some faith in the other owner.
Definitely.
Is that what we're talking about here?
Right. And is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
there's a Great Dane over here a few streets over, and I've seen it like
It's beautiful.
It's a pony.
big black, and
Yes.
and I've seen it like meet like a Jack Russell Terrier.
Oh, sure.
And I always think to myself, wow, like it always goes well.
Yeah.
But if that Great Dane one day, again, someone might say to me, Great Danes would never do that or whatever. But anyways,
no, any dog is capable.
Yeah. So that's what's happening. That you're putting, like Sara said, you're putting faith in another dog owner, and you're just like when you meet somebody for the first time,
Right.
you think they're not going to punch you in the face, most likely.
No,
Right?
and leashes are a thing. So
That's such a good question.
leash aggression is
Yeah.
a thing. And so if you were going to meet some new kid on the playground and you were being held back by your parent, that creates a bit more anxiety. So it's really important that when you are introducing dogs to each other, that you have that quick dialogue to talk about, is your dog okay? Are you okay if they meet? And be prepared for if they do meet. And again, those leashes, you're like this. You just want them to sniff. And it's really awkward for both the owners and the dogs because they're trying to get to each other, but they're being held back. And often that can create some angst in itself and have that meeting not go well. So if you see someone on the street and they say, you know what, my dog is great with people, I'd rather not. You need to respect that. And often people go, but no, my dog is so friendly. Toodaloo is just
I love
the
that you're adding
friendliest,
this voice because I've seen
loveliest
this so
thing.
many
Right, it's a
times.
thing.
Yeah.
I experience it all the time. Our dogs are great. They love meeting other dogs, but there's two of them. And they bang into each other when you're walking them and they get excited. And they're old. They're 10 and 12. But they are spry. And so they're bumping into each other, and then the one sounds like a dinosaur roaring, and the other one's squealing. She can't really hear very well, but she's a husky mix, so she's got that high-pitched wolf-like squeal. And then the other people are sort of traumatized. But if they still want to meet us, I just say, you know what, it's probably best when they're together. It's a bit more, it's chaotic, and then leaches are going on, and you're like, hi, how are you, Betty? And you're tripping, and it's a gong show.
So some dogs, by their nature, can be just loners or antisocial. They're just
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah. Independent, and it doesn't mean it's not necessarily attributed to any sort of background. So you have people who have puppies who 3 years in turn strangely aggressive or are really protective of their people and don't want to socialize with other dogs. So even though they've probably done everything right to socialize that dog, and things change just like people. So
This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
Yeah, I learned a lot of stuff.
I knew coming into this that I had lots of ideas about the Humane Society already, lots of more than anything, lots of feelings about it, right? And oh my gosh, this has been an amazing.
Good. I'm glad. And you've been for a tour, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I love it.
We'll have to get Sara in there.
I love the fact that our school, the KW Bilingual School in grade
Yes.
2, takes the kids on a tour there.
Yes.
And I think that's a great age to take them in.
Their camps are quite good as well because it isn't completely animal focused. It's outside and everything, but they'll have special guests come in, or they'll go midweek to the Butterfly Conservatory and learn about butterflies. So it isn't just about cats and dogs. It's about so much more than that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Can you, just because you mentioned the kids program, can you quickly tell us sort of how people can get involved, how people can get their kids involved, where we should go to volunteer, who we should call if we want to donate, all that stuff?
Yeah, the website has recently been redone, so it's quite up to date with everything from ways to get involved to services that we provide to you can fill out an online application for a volunteer form. Social media, we're very active on social media, so especially when you're looking for kids programming and whatnot, we're constantly promoting the different services that we have. It's a great way to engage. It's a great way to learn, and you can walk in and talk to people. I mean, the staff there are really, there's one woman at the front desk who every day has a different hat on. She has a headband that says, I like big mutts and I cannot lie. So she's a bit of a storyteller for us. Yeah. So if you see her around the holidays, she's always in the news. But that's one of the best ways that you can learn about our priorities. So donations are obviously always welcome, but there's also like a wish list. So if you're someone who doesn't want to give money, but you like to give bleach, that's your thing. There's always a wish list that you can go and drop off supplies. There are extra blankets or socks. So socks, when everybody loses their socks. Sometimes there are calls out for socks because they'll cut off the end and use them after kittens get spayed, so that they're not
smart.
bothering the incisions.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's sock requests.
Okay, good to know.
So yeah, if you have those odd socks, they could have a purpose, not in the landfill. They could go to a cat.
So what is the website?
So it's kwsphumane.ca.
And your Instagram?
So if you look up KWSP Humane anything, or even KW Humane Society, it'll divert you back to that main site. Facebook as well, and Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And aside from all that, you have a full-on day job and 2 kids.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I sound like I work for them, don't I?
Yeah. Well,
Well, thank you for the work you do.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a joy. And again, there's so many causes out there that we could all be passionate about. But I've always been drawn to the animal side of things, and if I can make their lives a little bit better and understand how they connect with people, I hope that I can make the lives of people better.
I think you do.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
Jacqueline.
me. Appreciate the opportunity. We're really excited about it.
I don't want a bowl of little fishies. You can't take a goldfish for a walk. How much is that doggy in the window? The one with the waggly tail.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.